Hey there, my name's Curtis Lucas and you're watching Empire Building. Now in this episode there's really one thing I want to talk about, and that's Bitcoin breaking above $58,000. If you look at this longer term 1 hour chart, you can see we've been in this very strong uptrend ever since we bottomed out down at about $40,000. Earlier today, in the morning trading hours, things started to look a little dicey as we were testing this 200 exponential moving average on the hourly chart. I'll have to admit that there is a part of me that thought maybe it might not hold, but certainly the buyers showed up in strong numbers and was able to push this a whole lot higher quite quickly. The overall increase on that move was actually almost 8% from the bottom to the current top. And to be honest, I don't think we're done yet. By morning, this will most likely be higher, just my opinion, but it'll be what it'll be. Looking at the daily chart, things are looking pretty darn good right now. And one of the things I really wanted to talk about with regards to this is most people and conventional wisdom would suggest that we will hit resistance at $64,000 or around 65 before breaking out into new all-time highs. And that may be true. We certainly did experience that once we hit the $20,000 all-time high previously last December. It's hard to believe that was not even a year ago. But the point I want to drive at here is that just because things should be resistance, it doesn't mean they always will be. You have to be very careful with this. And while this isn't quite the same scenario, if we go back to a portion of the previous cycle, when we came out of the bear market the first time, I guess you could say this was the depth of the bear market. Most people tend to refer to the COVID crash, but honestly, you can't really count black swan events like that. It's not exactly baked into the typical Bitcoin life cycle. But when life kind of shot back into Bitcoin, when we rose up from the absolute bottom of this bear market, many people were expecting to meet with some significant resistance once we reached these price levels, because we had spent so long trading at that, and people were sure that we were going to hit a hard ceiling when we got to that level. And if you zoom in, when we reached that level, it didn't even break stride. If anything, it sped up, and it barely looked back. The price would go on to more than double after that, with not a whole lot in the way of significant pullbacks, certainly not any that lasted for any extended periods of time. And trying to trade, even maybe in this small region, you would have some lucky trades if you were fortunate enough to get out at the tops of any of these cycles. But more likely than not, you end up somewhere in the middle, and then faced with impossible decisions on trying to figure out whether or not it'll pull back before it continues to rip higher. And that's where those who are able to hold long-term really earn their stripes. It's not easy being kicked around over and over and over again, but it's even worse so when you're trying to reposition yourself constantly. And you have to be very careful, because this is a slippery slope. There's a clip from a great movie called Molly's Game that came out recently. I'm going to share one short, brief clip from that movie.
Harlan, the best player at the table, the best player at most tables, was about to get bluffed off the win by, of all people, Bad Brad. Every tell Harlan knows about, carotid artery pumping, stiff hands. Brad's doing the opposite. Of course, Harlan didn't know that Brad didn't know what any of that meant, as he tossed in what he didn't realize was the winning hand.
Hopefully YouTube doesn't demonetize me for this, but have a look, and this perfectly highlights what I'm talking about here.
It wasn't even that it was that much money. Harlan only lost about $40,000 on the hand. But a circuit breaker blew, and Harlan was out for blood now.
Sign here for 100,000.
By 5 a.m., Harlan was down $500,000. He'd abandoned everything he knew about poker and was playing like a frat kid, swinging for a home run on every hand.
So the point here is that everybody has their breaking point. I think that everybody has the perfect combination of events that could lead them down a path that's very hard to come back from. And it all has to do with this sunken cost fallacy. Unfortunately, that story has played itself out over and over and over again. And I've talked about this many times, and I myself have fallen victim to this exact same scenario. I've seen that it's been abundantly clear that had I chose to sit back and do nothing at all, things would have turned out far better. But as I've mentioned before, it's never too late to start again. It's never too late to reset the clock and start making better decisions. Start thinking long term. That's not to say that there won't be some new FUD cycle to come next, but generally speaking, that tends to happen after enough excitement has been generated. You can see from Google Trends that when you look for the term buy Bitcoin, there's very little increase here. We've been at the same levels we were back in June. This entire run-up has happened without new people entering the market. Unfortunately, as has always been the case, the crowds never show up until after most of the gains have been realized. And I'm still expecting that before this cycle is over, we would have probably taken out this old all-time high from 2017. We haven't reached anywhere near peak excitement. And that for me has always been the driving indicator. That's really why I didn't think we were done here yet. Because the real question here is this period that we've witnessed here could be more akin to these couple of spikes that we saw before the real run-up back in 2017. If we have that level of excitement happen again, there's no telling where the prices could go. So that's really my take on things right now. I can't say I know what's going to happen next. Some of you may remember that I actually do have a crystal ball, but it's never really been any good to me. I picked this up thinking I might use it as a prop from time to time, but it's never really been all that practical. But here it is nonetheless. Maybe one day I'll modify my studio and set this up as some sort of a permanent fixture. But for now, the best thing we can do is make the best decisions we can with the information that we have and think long term. Well, that's all for this one. Now let's get back to empire building.